Okay, so according to Aaker and the Journal of Marketing, there's 5 different types of brand personality. That's across the top. So you've got sincere, excitement, competence, rugged, and sophisticated. And there's different ways to present each. So what we've done here is try to use some fairly well-known people just to illustrate the brand personality traits. So with this, a lot of the information that we have determines how we perceive a person or a brand. And in some respects, all of these people have got a brand of their own sorts. So if we look at things like Vicky Fiona, that you may be familiar with her, she's become a meme that's triggered basically. And basically, it's not particularly pleasant for her because she was obviously very sincere in her distaste and disgust with Donald Trump at this particular rally where she was snapped. Unfortunately for her, she became viral and associated with quite negative connotations, as opposed to someone like Emma Watson, where we actually do have some more information. So this was Emma at the UN Women's Conference, and she gave a very good account of herself. She was very poised. She was very dignified in the way she carried herself. Obviously a trained actress. We already know her from the Harry Potter series. And, you know, she's very sincere in the way that she puts herself across. Very quickly, we've got John Gotti, the gangster, quite an exciting lifestyle. The movies really portray that, but obviously also comes with a very negative connotations of killing people and, you know, exploiting people and so on, as opposed to someone like Bear Grylls, who gives us that excitement through our television, doing all kinds of dangerous and exciting things. Philip Green, very competent businessman, but also, as we know, very nasty, took the pension away from all his staff and spent it. And then on the other side of that competent side, Richard Walker, MD of Iceland Foods, known for banning single-use plastic from their stores and being very good to the team. So very competent, but a positive side of that. Paul Golding, the leader of the BNP party, he's a big chap, rugged, you might say. As you know, a lot of people would say that they're quite fascist. They've got very negative connotations of how rugged he is, and he comes across as a thug compared to someone like Tom Hardy, who's also very rugged, but you might even see him on CBeebies reading a bedtime story, and he's certainly a favourite with a lot of ladies. And then again on the end, Jacob Rees-Mogg, what's more sophisticated than a top hat? But he comes across to a lot of people as a kind of Tory slimeball, very creepy guy, to a lot of people who hate the Tories particularly. And then you've got George Clooney, you know, very sophisticated chap, and again, a lady's favourite. The point is, it's the visual aspects that helps convey some of these messages. It's the context that we get these communications in and where they're placed. It's the tone of voice that they might use. It's what we know about them. It's what they say. And it's also their actions. And this is exactly the same as the branding that you put out there. You know, the actions that your brand undertakes, the way you present yourselves, the way you communicate with people. These are all things that we choose to show or leave out, and it can affect how we're perceived. And what we're going to do across the course of this webinar today is explain that brands are much more than just a logo. Every company is a brand. And so we're going to explain the different components that make up a brand personality. And we're going to explain to you how brands with personality, with good personalities, tend to do better. And hopefully you're going to pick up some tips and tricks that you can employ for your own brands that are going to help you be more engaging with people. So let's crack on and pass you over to Andy, who's going to talk about the data behind brands.
It's always really important to start with your kind of customer set. Who is that person? And you'll see throughout a lot of our webinars, no matter what we talk about, really, we start with who is your ideal customer or particular generation? What do they look like?
Andy, I'm just going to there's somebody's getting a lot of background noise. It sounds like you're in a cab centre. If you could do us a favour and just turn your mic off, because it keeps cutting in. It's quite distracting.
How exciting! The virtual paddle is on its way to you, Japanese.
That's it. If that's you, would you mind just turning your mic off? Thanks.
Right, okay, I'll just start that bit again. When we start with new clients, we always look at the data behind their particular client set or different generation. So we'd really advise you to do this as well. Just think about who your ideal customer is and what type of generation that they fall into. You can get a lot of this data from the BIPC. So it's really important to have a good understanding of the different generations. But if we start with Gen Zers, the 7 to 25-year-olds, makes you kind of feel pretty old, does with me anyway. But actually now they're starting to have children. They're becoming quite a big buyer group, especially at the older end of that generation. Now they're quite socio-political, so they're interested in the environment, they're interested in world issues, interested in topical issues. When it comes to reviews, it's big on their agenda. In terms of celebrities, they do tend to follow celebrities, but actually don't get sold to by them. And who they trust is very much an expert vlogger over someone like a celebrity, because they'll buy from people like them. When it comes to loyalty, it tends to be in the middle. They are loyal to brands only if they have authenticity, though. And when it comes to sharing their personal information, they don't like to do that. They're quite anonymous. But this is it's a big group to consider. So when we're going through all of these, just paint a picture of what is the generation that you're selling to, and it could be all of them, but it just might be one or two. And if you get an understanding of this, you'll be able to put the right messages in the right places. Millennials, 26 to 40-year-olds. So there's lots of variants with these guys, fast becoming the biggest consumer group. The loyalty to brands is medium to high, so it's a little bit more than the Gen Zers. And they're actually, there's more influencers in the millennials than any other group. And this is the reason why it's a really big group for influencer marketing. So that could be an area if this is your particular set. And they also buy from influencers and really are influencers themselves. What you got to remember is this is a group that was pre-smartphone, so they remember the world before digital, but they are actually, the digital natives. And throughout the generations, they tend to have a foot in every camp with their age spread. Essentially, these guys are your immediate future group, so this is a really big group to consider. We also have Gen X, so the 41 to 55s, current reigning champs, we'd say, and they're actually the biggest consumer group out of all of them. Again, it's been narrowed by the millennials. They're also pushing towards that boomer group, so they're heading towards the elderly. They also remember a time before the internet, but they have started to adopt technology. Still have traditional tendencies. Traditional media really works well with these guys. But when it comes to a brand, they look for quality products, quality services. And if you can do that, then they'll have really high loyalty to your brand. Also, as well as a group, they're financially wealthier, so they do tend to buy the higher end products out of everybody. And then finally, the boomers, 56 plus. These guys are less influential online, but even though they are, don't overlook them. It's still a massive market for you to go at, should this be your particular set. Now, they are less interested in marketing, and they're more traditional in terms of the marketing, so they don't tend to buy from digital. When it comes to searching for brands and looking, search engines is their go-to to find information. But they've also started to use Facebook, but YouTube's the biggest one that they will use in terms, just for looking at videos and sharing information. When it comes to loyalty, these are lowest out of everyone in terms of brand loyalty. But when it comes to buying, they will buy anything really that is the best offer to them, own brand stuff type of thing. But they're very money conscious, you see. Now they are less influenced by marketing campaigns because they're a bit more skeptical. So if you're thinking about doing a paid ad or something like that on Facebook or a social platform, probably wouldn't work as well as a paid ad would to other particular groups. Not saying they won't altogether, it's just a less chance for them to click on it. But actually what does resonate with them is TV. So you know, that's where they consume most media, is through the TV. So a TV ad would. So understanding all the different audience groups is really key to your branding and alignment. And all of that information above, it just tells you how to choose the right messages to put to your target audience. So really worth just spending a couple of hours figuring who your audience is before you start putting out a load of messages.
So let's just demonstrate to you now some brands with personality and what it is about them that really makes them very engaging. They're very popular brands that are doing incredibly well with their marketing communications and demonstrating what it is about their brand that is so appealing. So this is Patagonia. If you're an outdoor fan, you probably know them as Patagucci. Because it's pretty pricey gear. It was started by a surfer called Yvon Chouinard back in the 70s, and he's all about the environment. He spends so much time outdoors. He wanted to create some clothing that was high quality that he could use for life, and so he built the brand Patagonia from scratch. And they're very environmentally considerate. They're not just greenwashers. These guys really live it, and because of that, they've got an absolutely madly passionate audience. They're obsessive, and they really live the brand. So the whole purpose of the brand is to support the environment. They have 1% for the planet, where they give 1% of their profits every year goes to various charities and initiatives that are all about protecting the earth and giving back to the earth. And they often do initiatives. So the worn wear thing that you can see there on the left, repair is a radical act. They're very sort of forthright in this side of things, big campaigners, and they do this incredible roadshow that they take around all the countries that they operate in. So you can basically turn up to one of their shops with your wetsuit that needs repairing, or your jacket, or your trousers, but it doesn't even have to be a Patagonia brand. They'll repair any brand as long as it's outdoor clothing, and they get queues going all the way around the block for this stuff. It's fantastic because all of those people are obviously going into the shop, they're being exposed to their brand, but also they're getting, a lot of them are getting a free repair out of it. And in many cases, they've now got to the point where they don't just do a basic repair, they actually introduce new colors into your clothing and make them completely unique and different. And people love them for it. They get loads of exposure from it. It's shared across the internet. They're verifying that they're not just greenwashing, they're actually doing something that makes a difference. And then they push this kind of messaging out all through their different marketing messages. So again, the don't buy this jacket right in the middle there, that's a big ad campaign that they ran on the build up to Black Friday in 2017. And what they were ultimately saying is, don't buy stuff just for the sake of it. They did this whole anti-fast fashion sort of thing. Buy quality, and then you don't need to keep replacing clothes and getting them sent to landfill when you finish with them. You know, it was all very authentic. It was all very clever marketing because it increased their sales massively. And on Black Friday 2017, they actually gave 100% of their profits to the 1% for the planet. So they changed it to 100% for the planet, of course. And it was actually an idea that an intern came up with. Again, just demonstrating that they're an inclusive company. You know, they treat everybody's ideas as valid. So the intern said, well, what if we gave 100% of the profits back? And Yvonne said, this is a fantastic idea. Let's do it just for the day. They thought they were going to do about 2 million off the back of Black Friday, and they did 10 million because their marketing really appealed to people. And the idea that they were going to give the profits back to the planet was just so good that they had massive amount of sales. Now, the amazing thing that came out of this is actually over the following 2 weeks, their sales went up to $30 million. They normally do about 100 million in a whole year. They did a third of that in a 2-week period. So it really did pay off. The idea of giving 100% of your profits away might sound a little bit too far, but the fact is they ended up far exceeding what they thought they would do. they're a really high-end brand that's about sustainability. And they're not just doing clothes anymore. They're now even getting into meat farming. Because again, Yvonne Chouinard said, well, we're not going to be able to stop meat production. So maybe we can find a way to do it more sustainably. And so they're now starting to delve into that world. Basically, they're a brand that does good. That's the purpose behind their brand. And it goes out into every single aspect, from the communications to the marketing, to the advertising, to their branding. Everything they do is around that. So now let's have a look at another idea about how a brand communicates that personality really well in a slightly different way. Andy.
We all know Innocent. Basically started with two guys rocking up to a festival, load of blenders, load of fruit, and a bit of water. Basically something that any of us can make. And actually, loads of people have tried to set up businesses doing this, but they've not made it like these guys have made it. And the reason these guys made it is because they had truckloads of brand personality. It's as simple as that. And that's essentially what their brand is built on. It's based on, you know, innocence. It's based on simplicity. It's a really quirky brand. You know, you can see on the picture there, stop looking at my bottom, just little things like that. They don't really mean anything, but it's something that, you know, will make something smile when they do eventually see it. And stuff like that gets, you know, touted around social media channels all the time. So they're quite a charming brand. And they actually do loads of fun campaigns as well, just to really get it going. I don't know if a few years ago, I don't know if anyone will remember, they bought a new a blue drink out. And it was one of those things where to some people it looked green, to others it looked blue. Basically, a big debate broke out throughout social media, all light-hearted, of course, where people started arguing that no, it's blue, it's green, etc. So after a couple of days, they quickly reacted to this because they knew they were onto something. Now, I don't know whether they did this on purpose with the colours or something, but they roped in Duncan from Blue really to get clarification, and did like a 2-minute ad where he's explaining why the drink is actually blue in a light-hearted way, because he loves blue so much, and the band had been disbanded and he's only doing it for money because he was skint now because, you know, he hasn't got a job anymore. And it was a really light-hearted thing. Again, they jumped on the back of people saying, is it blue, is it green? They went a step further with something that was really simple, and they got it going. And, you know, people wanted to be associated with the brand. They loved it because there was no sugar in it and it was really good for the environment and that type of thing, which it was. And they built this brand up to a massive monster, and then actually sold it to Coca-Cola for 100 million. And then obviously they filled it with sugar, so it's not so innocent anymore. But, you know, the idea is, I know, you know, we're talking about Blue, Duncan from Blue and things like that, and that must have been a big budget, and I can't afford that for my brand. But they started somewhere, and it's just that thinking about the bigger picture of where you are now, how are you going to talk to people, how is your brand conveyed to people, and that type of thing, and just building on that. So they thought differently. They were thinking about their customers. What do their customers want to hear? And they appeal to their values. And you can do that too. If you have a clear picture and you make it really easy for them, you'll basically stand a better chance of converting them and keeping them.
Okay, this one's hot off the press. So this is actually happening right now. Weetabix basically posted, why should bread have all the fun when there's Weetabix? Serving up at Heinz UK beans on Bix for breakfast with a twist. Anyone like the idea of baked beans on Weetabix? Probably not. It sounds pretty gross. But what's absolutely brilliant about this is everybody's jumped on board this. Basically, Twitter, Weetabix put this one thing out on Twitter and then sat back and let everybody else do the work, sending it viral for them. And you've got some absolutely fantastic replies, but the ultimate winners of this in terms of personality have got to be Weetabix, you know, poking a bit of fun at themselves, letting everybody roast them. Things like Citizens Advice, we can't advise anyone to try this. Tesco's illegal combination in the bagging area. Virgin Atlantic, that doesn't fly with us. Which, this is not which recommended. West Yorkshire Police, even though this is criminal, please don't ring us to report it. Specsavers, removes glasses, puts on blindfold. One of my favorites, Domino's Pizza. Pineapple on pizza is the most controversial food ever. Weetabix, hold my spoon. Love that one. Absolutely love that. NHS, that tweet should come with a health warning. Babe, are you okay? Says Lidl. You've hardly touched your Weetabix and beans. And another favourite of mine, RNLI. Our volunteer crews are prepared to brave all sorts of windy conditions, but not this. This is personality through and through, not just from Weetabix, but they brought loads of other brands into the action. And it's an absolute joy to see this kind of stuff. Now, we actually, we've got a formula for writing clever and funny content that we're going to cover in one of our other workshops called How to Plan Social and Make Compelling Content. And actually, something that you can use right now, a little sneak preview of that, if you like, is if you break some of this stuff down, there's actually a comedy formula to a lot of this stuff. You know, you can look at these kind of things and say, how have they done that? And how could I do it? And we did it ourselves this morning. We actually did a retweet of the Weetabix thing and put our own response on there. And we've even done it for one of our clients as well that makes ready-made healthy food called I'll Do Tea. And we posted out there, if you've even considered having this for breakfast, don't worry. And we changed the logo to I'll Do Breakfast. And already it's starting to get a lot of engagements in there. And it's that personality thing. You can jump in and show your side of your personality by getting involved in something that's relevant. It's a really great way to brand position yourself, to raise brand awareness, and to tell people a little bit about what you're about, and having a bit of fun with it. I mean, for Weetabix, this was minimal effort, maximum effect. So these are the kind of things that you want to be looking out for and thinking about. So let's just have a look now at how you can build your brand, how you can add to it, how you can develop it and evolve it to make it as engaging and full of personality as you possibly can. First of all, let's just start with the anatomy of a brand. So we're just going to give you the structure of it. It really comes down to three things: personality, presentation, and communication, and they all feed each other. So if we start with personality, this is going to cover a lot of different aspects. So there's a lot of things that break this apart. First of all, let's think about positioning. Now, it doesn't matter if you're a high-end brand, you're a low-end brand, or you're somewhere in between. You can still make a ton of money. If you look at Home Bargains, they actually make far more money than Louis Vuitton. And I think you'll agree the Home Bargains logo looks cheap, but that's okay because it is cheap. What I used to find as a creative director is a lot of new designers would start with us, and they all, you know, if they were fresh out of uni or whatever, they wanted to put their stamp on things. They wanted to make things look cool and hipster, regardless of whether it was a cheap and cheerful kind of brand. So what I used to say to them is, you're not a fine artist, you're a commercial artist. And your responsibility is to be able to be flexible in the way that you design and appropriate. So if it's supposed to be cheap and cheerful, if I put my teeth back in, then make it look that way. You know, you don't want people misunderstanding and thinking it's a really high-end brand, even if it's really low prices. It's going to conflict with how people perceive it. They're going to mistrust it. So consider the audience, consider your price point, and position where appropriate. Don't just put your personal taste on it if it's not right for what the audience wants. And that goes back to what Andy was saying about what the different audiences and generations are looking for.
Right. So we've got mission, vision, and values up there, and it's really easy to confuse all three of them. When you're thinking about things like this, it's important to just question yourself. So what kind of company do you want to be? Who are you? What problem do you solve? Really important. You know, are you a volume like Home Bargains, stack them high, sell them cheap, or like Louis Vuitton? Are you premium? You know, your products are expensive, but it's worth it. Are you innovators? So are you bringing new products or services to the market that no one's done before? You could be a Me Too brand, so you copy innovation, but you actually make it affordable. Lots of them about. Or you could be a disruptor. So you're taking something out there and challenging the market, and you're making a really big splash. I've actually got a couple of good examples here for you. And this Gandhi Circus, this is a model that's been around for years and years. And what is it? Really, it's a moldy old big top in a field, loads of animals, a couple of acts, or probably one headline act, like the fantastic Flying Finnegans, that type of thing. Crusty old clown, sorry. Strongman. And what do you go, £7 to £15 a ticket, something like that? Now, there's loads of these circuses touring, or there was loads of these circuses touring a couple of years ago. Really, they're old-fashioned, they're out of date. But like I said, it's been around for years. So how do you change that up? How can you modernize the circus? How can you make it bigger or better or even more profitable? Well, these guys came along. I'm sure you've all heard the Cirque du Soleil, and they actually took the traditional model and shook it up massively. They modernized it. They brought it into the 21st century. Now, if we look at their positioning, if we look at the old circus model positioning, what did they have? So they had animals, and they were extremely high cost to buy, to maintain, to transport all around the UK. They had acts. So as I said earlier, probably one superstar or one star, one so super, and then a lot of lesser acts, pretty cheap tents. Like we said, 7 to 15 quid, pretty cheap tickets. So for them, for the old model, it was high cost for them to run it. It was loads of effort, and really they weren't getting much profit, were they? It was low profit. So if you look at Cirque du Soleil's positioning, what did they do first? I think that's the old one, Ben. Flick again. Yeah, so Cirque du Soleil, first thing they did, got rid of the animals, far too expensive, too divisive as well, cruelty to animals and all that. Instead of having one headline act, all their acts were superstars. They were all at the top of their game. They also had state-of-the-art big tops, but then they actually progressed to massive arenas. And these were warm, they were more comfortable, they were a lot bigger, so you could fit more people in. So if you've got all these things, you could charge a higher ticket price. And the reason you can is because it's just worth it to the spectator, to the consumer. They also added massive audio, visual, the state-of-the-art laser shows, and they had live bands performing there. So if you've seen, the old circus model, you've seen them all really. What these did to enable customers to keep coming back is it wasn't just the same thing touring. They created loads of different themes and different stories. And that's why people want to come back, because they've not seen the latest one yet. So they increase their value offer. They increase their profitability. They thought different, and it's a really clever thing what they've done, but they shook it up, and really they've revolutionized that industry, because they're making hundreds of millions, billions throughout the world. So just simple thinking like that. It's an old model. We've always done it this way. How can you shake things up a little bit? And you will be able to.
I think it's key to remember as well that all these businesses were the same size as you at some point in their history. So it's just that ability to think a bit differently. You might not have ambitions of taking over the world. You might be quite happy with dominating the local area, or you might just be a case of, I'm happy to make enough to, secure my future, that kind of stuff. But there are lots of things that you can do. There's different ways of approaching branding that can really help you. And that branding starts from within. That's the really key thing here, is the brand isn't a veneer that you put on the front. It's not just a logo. It's not just, a pretty website. It's thinking about, what can I do as a brand that it's going to excite people. It's going to interest people. How can I do it a bit differently? And how will that get me more attention? So let's talk about presentation, because once you've established what your brand is from within, it's time to start presenting that. And a lot of that starts with a name. And a lot of people get hung up on this. And there's lots of different approaches that you can take. You might go for something quirky and memorable like Google. Or maybe you'll go for something more descriptive, that's going to help with search engines and that kind of stuff, like appliances online there. Or maybe you want to go for something more emotive, like innocent. Or you might want to stick to something very traditional, like A&B marketing or whatever. Really, this is what you make of it. The brand builds the name. It's not just the name itself. It's all the other things that you do that support it. And what we often find when we're coming up with names for businesses or products or whatever is the first few weeks, it doesn't feel right. It kind of sticks in your mouth when you're saying it. There are some that, you know, are just fantastic and they fly immediately. But sometimes part of the company loves it, another part of the company's not sure, and you get the odd couple of people who absolutely hate it. But what we do find is after it's been in use for a while, it just feels right. So it's one of those things that really takes a bit of time and a bit of activity surrounding it to be able to make it stick. But if you are considering a new name or a new product name or whatever, a couple of things that you want to consider as well. Do a search. You can do a search via Companies House and see if there's other businesses that are, you know, in your sector that already have that name registered. You can go on to the company's registrar and see if there's any companies that are operating in your category that have the same name, in which case you might be told to cease and desist. You might also want to look on somewhere like GoDaddy or 123reg and see if the domain name's available. And there's lots of ways you can work that if it isn't. So you can add, you know, official or company, that kind of stuff. And you might also want to think on social media, am I going to be able to get this name working as well? Bit of a weird fact, but there's no individual word in the English language that's now available as a .co.uk or a .com. So you can't get a single word on its own that's now available. You can buy it if it's if somebody's up for selling it, but just standard basic names for businesses are all taken up. So nowadays you normally have to add 2 or 3 words together, like Royal Flush Marketing or whatever, to be able to get it. If you just wanted Royal, then that's obviously going to be gone. Interestingly as well, if you do use Royal in your name, you have to actually get permission from the Palace. And we had to get an email from the Palace marketing department to say we could use Royal Flush. Very strange, but quite fun. So let's talk about what's in a name now. Be really honest with me. Maybe just tap into the chat. When you see the word Oasis, what do you think of? Immediately, what's your instinct? Don't try and be clever. What did you think of straight away when you saw Oasis? Just tap it on into the chat there. Let's get some answers going. Burnage, yes, absolutely right. Oasis, the band. You know, if you're a certain age from a certain era, they defined an absolute generation, didn't they? In fact, some people wouldn't be able to think of anything else. And people are saying in there, Burnage, the band, of course you are. Because there's tons of marketing, tons of presence around it. Maybe you thought of the sugary drink. Perhaps if you've got kids or you're a big fan of this yourself, maybe Oasis brings that drink to mind. Or maybe for the girls out there, it's a retail fashion house. You know, certain age group, that's what you might remember. Or maybe if you're a florist, you'll think of the styrofoam, something that you put all the flowers in to keep them in place. You know, that still resonates with a certain group of people. The point is, it's actually a watering hole in the desert. And it's often, when we do this exercise, one of the last things that come up. So, you know, somebody said in the comments, a food hall at Meadow Hall. You know, it's what it means to you. It's about the context and the familiarity. So you can make a brand your own. You can actually own it, you know, in many respects. So now we've thought about the name, what about some kind of logo design? I'm just going to give you a potted history of the logo. It actually started with your stonemasons. And the idea of this is if you're a really highly skilled and perfectionist stonemason, and you're working on a cathedral or a castle with loads of other stonemasons, how do you tell your work apart from other people's? My part of the cathedral might be very decorative and highly skilled, or it might just be that I can, you know, get a really good level and a great straight line, but I don't want to be marked down for the guy next to me. So what I'd do is I would chisel in my own particular mark. And that would then show the bosses when they come to inspect the work that my section starts here at this mark and it ends here at this mark. That's the piece of work that I've been working on today. And that means that you're not getting marked down for the shoddy guy next to you who's made it all wobbly and is being told to do it again. And what they then saw with the stonemasons is that when they were queuing up to get paid, the guy who's paying them didn't know what kind of level they were at. Were they a novice, an apprentice, or were they a master stonemason? And so you got the development of the secret handshakes. And that basically told the paymaster, if you squeezed your little finger or you pressed a certain place with your thumb, that told him what level you were at. And so you'd get paid accordingly for it. And obviously they didn't want to share that because they didn't want the apprentice getting paid the same level as them. So you got this idea of the secret handshake. And that's kind of how the Masons has developed over the years to what we know now as quite a secretive society, particularly involved with business. But then you get onto the signet ring. So the signet ring, you might be familiar with it. You might wear one yourself. Started around the sort of times of the nobles in the Middle Ages, that kind of thing. And really, as you can see there, you get this embossed insignia, the house insignia, and it was stamped in wax seals that was put on scrolls or envelopes. And essentially, it was a mark of quality. It was a mark to say this officially represents the house of, So you get this kind of logo that starts to develop at this stage in history. And that's certainly something that's carried through to today. It represents who you are. Right up to, in the sort of industrial revolution, people started putting words up on the side of their warehouses to say this as an identifier, really, to say this is where we are. This is where you can get your meat products, or this is where you can buy your wool. And after a while that started to develop, they started to change from just a very standard blocky font into something a bit more descriptive, a bit more elegant. So you started to get the first aspects of that brand personality creeping in. And that's the point. This is representing who your brand is. It's supposed to look like what you are. And that's the whole development of all of this. But a logo is part of, but it's not all of branding.
Right. So now we've got a logo and a name. What color are you going to choose? What are the typical colors and what do they represent? So you could, for example, you could have red. It's quite a confident color, but it's also can be construed as excitement, strength, love, energy. Can also mean warning. So, it's not commonly used in the financial sector. You don't want to scare people off. But when we talk about, excitement or warning, does it matter to everybody? You've got, Virgin, Richard Branson, where he's got, the hot air balloons and the Boeings and that type of thing. So he wasn't really bothered about, the type of color, whether it would mean danger. Is he bothered about people not going to go on his aeroplane at 30,000 feet because of the color? He's a bit of a disruptor anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But it can matter to your business. So you just have a think when you're doing it. You've got like greens and blues are commonly used in finance because they convey like trust, loyalty, competence, that type of thing. There's your pink's quite feminine. Again, that's changing all the time as gender broadens and blurs. Then you got your classics, your blacks and whites. Essentially, it lets the images do the talking. It's quite sophisticated. So really, just think about your brand and think about what color it represents. We've got a bit of a game for you, actually. So we've got 10 brands there. We just want to highlight the importance of color. Can you guess all the logos? You don't say what they are. Just write them down and say how many you get in the chat screen. I'll just give you a minute or so.
Let's see who can get the high score on this one.
Win a prize as well if you get 10 out of 10.
What's the prize, Andy?
I don't know, yeah. Who?
Yeah, Bruce says, great. is increasing in popularity from home decor and furnishings, and now I'm seeing it more in business. Does that include both black and white traits? Yeah, it can do. There's loads of stuff out there about the psychology of color, and so it's one of those things that have a look into it. Yeah, it's seen as quite sophisticated. It could be a trend, you know. So as particularly with interiors, grey seems to be everywhere at the moment, but it might disappear. Gainer giving it all away there. Let's have a look. So we've got
Come on,
some
Gainer.
with 7 and 8. This is a good group. Some people
Yeah.
with 2, 5, 7, and 8. Gainer's giving it away. So let's move on. If it's in colour, for those people who did struggle a little bit with the black and white, does colour help? Sorry, Andy, I'm taking over from you.
It's all right. Yeah, no, it's in colour. Do you a 9 with colour? Rob's got still 7, right? Yeah, there's some that you know straight away. But once you know them all, you go, yeah. But colour does tend to help. If you're after the answers anyway, they're all there. Which ones did some of you miss? So basically the point of it is colour can mean a lot. So you know it is worth all these things. They're all worth considering. Don't just go with straight away. We're going to do this. So just question yourself a little bit. UPS, yeah, I struggled on that UPS one as well. Difficult.
And don't worry, Gainer, it's only a bit of fun.
The CC brand.
Right. Okay. Well done, everyone. Especially the ones who've got above 7. That's phenomenal. But
it was Chanel, by the way. Sorry, Gainer. Who asked what was the CC brand?
Yeah, Chanel.
Chanel. There you go.
So we've talked about logos. We've talked about color. Let's talk about typefaces for a minute. Now, typefaces are types of fonts. Just to clarify that. Fonts themselves can be all kinds of different things. You can have traditional, modern. At the moment, hipster seems to still be doing quite well, even though it's been about 4 or 5 years. Novelty fonts, quirky fonts, it goes on. There's all kinds of different things, from script and brush script and all this kind of stuff. And usually what happens is you get artists that design these fonts and spend hours, you know, fussing over whether it's a serif, you know, those little lines that you tend to get on the traditional, or a sans serif where you don't get those little tails and little flicks, that kind of stuff. And then they develop these fonts and they put them out there to sell, which usually means they come with a license. A lot of people will get standard fonts that they use in Microsoft Word, or that kind of stuff. And, you know, it can look like it's designed in Microsoft Word, which can cheapen it to a certain degree in the perception of people. But there's all sorts of ways that you can use these, and it's about choosing what's appropriate for you. If you're a business finance type company, then maybe a novelty or a hipster kind of font isn't going to be quite appropriate for what you're doing. Maybe it doesn't represent you properly. Or maybe you're a disruptor and you don't care and you're going to change it all up and use something like that. But something else that you might want to ask yourself when you're thinking about your branding design, you know, your logo, will it date quickly? Is it something that's a bit of a fad? We were talking about this from the chat, you know, grey. Is that going to combine the positive attributes of black and white? Yeah, it might do. How long will it last? Is this something that you're going to have to update in a couple of years? And we do see certain brands changing the logos. Next, it moved from uppercase to lowercase. It moved from serif to sans serif. It changed its identity quite significantly over the period of 10 years. You often see people getting quite upset when brands change their identity. Back in 2017, Formula One changed their identity that they'd had for 20 years. It was from the 80s. And basically, when they changed it and gave it this slick new modern look, everybody got really excited about it, very angry. It tended to be quite negative at the time. And there was an angry mob that kind of formed behind Vettel and Lewis Hamilton, who were particularly vocal about it on social media. But what we found was that actually that very quickly dissipated. And before you know it, people got familiar with that. And now a lot of people actually really like it. So use typefaces appropriately. It might be that you don't just use it for your logo, but you're going to use it across your website, across your marketing communications, that kind of stuff. And it all helps to form part of how you present your brand personality. So we've got a few different ways this can be used here. It could be used as a headline, something that's, you know, at the top of your website or the top of a brochure or an advert, something that's going to get people's attention. So you might want something bolder. You might want something a bit more decorative, something that's attractive and is going to make people look at it. But then you've got your body copy, and you've got to have a few considerations here. This is an excerpt that we did for one particular company that we did some branding for, and this is from their brand guidelines. Now, some people might not find a condensed font that's very narrow and tall easy to read, so that's something to consider. But this was a brand evolution, so they didn't want something too radical. They wanted quite a gentle change. So we gave them an alternative. You can use the Ballinger X condensed, or maybe you can just expand that a little bit and have Arial narrow, which is just a bit wider and a bit clearer. You've got to think about things like people with visual impairment or maybe dyslexic. Is it something that they can read easily? And then it gets into that whole thing of emails. Now, something that's very common here is that people use a decorative font in their email, and they send it off and they spend ages, you know, formatting it with tabs and returns and this, that, and the other. And then they send it off and it gets completely messed up by the time it gets to the recipient. The reason for this is there are certain safe fonts in email. There's probably 6 or 7 that you can use. So what we would recommend is if you're sending out an email, stick to the standard fonts and maybe find one that's nearest to match what you actually use in your branding, because it will mean that the formatting carries across and you don't get what looks like a bag of washing at the other end. So do check that. One other little tip, check the glyphs. Glyphs are things like ampersands, at signs, pound signs, brackets, all that kind of stuff. If you're using one of the free fonts on the internet, sometimes they'll say not for commercial use, but sometimes you can use them quite happily. But you can get caught out, and we've been caught out many times, doing an 11th hour advert that somebody's just fired in and said, please, can you do this urgently for us? And we've been starting to use their font and suddenly discovered that there's no glyphs, and actually we need them for that. So we've had to create our own to try and match up to the font, and it can just be a bit awkward. Anyway, that's enough about typefaces. Let's talk about imagery, because a picture paints 1,000 words, and this is part of how you present yourselves. Now, there's lots of options out there. We'll start with stock imagery, and if you go for stock imagery, it can be really cost effective. There's loads of different stock libraries from Getty, tends to be quite expensive, right the way through to Adobe stock. You've got Alamy, tons and tons of them. All you've got to do is search the internet and you'll find one of these stock libraries, or lots of them. And they tend to have lots of different types of images in there. So you can often search and some kind of image will come up to represent it. But I'd advise you to be careful here. There's lots of cliches, things like the jigsaw puzzle. You see that used all the time by people. And is it really portraying the personality that you want to? Are you an obvious brand? Is it lazy? You know, is it obvious? And do people a bit sick of seeing that? You get these kind of handshakes and all that kind of stuff. People see it everywhere. The classic call center look. It can look cheesy and American. It can be a bit overused. Or you get these awful metaphors like these, this miniature man. You know, there's even threads now where they take the Mickey out of stock imagery. It can be impersonal. The other thing is it can be inconsistent. So if you are going to use stock imagery, and there are some fantastic libraries out there and amazing images, then what we'd say is try and choose your images all at once. Get yourself a library stock together, even if you don't buy them all at once, and just save them somewhere, because that's going to help you get that consistency. What we're talking about here is thinking about the temperature of the shot. Is it quite a warm shot, or is it quite a cold shot? Are you using lots of different types of people in there? Are you representing everybody? You know, or are you just being tokenist? Think about the image set working together. think about how you're going to portray it, because this all represents your brand. If you're using it on your website and your brochures, if you're using it in advertising and on social media, think very carefully about how you do it. And what we would say is, don't just pinch them off Google. If you're using them for commercial purposes, make sure you buy the license for it, because we've had 2 clients now that have used images that they shouldn't have used. And then suddenly they've had a letter through the post from Getty saying, thank you for using our image. Unfortunately, we can see you haven't paid for the license, and that's going to cost you £500,000, £15,000. And they've had quite an alarming shock, and they're caught red-handed. So there's nothing they can do about it. They've done it in innocence or ignorance, but unfortunately, that's somebody's livelihood. That's somebody's talent and skill. They've taken that picture and they want paying for it. So do think about it. There's a very interesting little gadget out there. You can just type in reverse search on Google, and you can actually upload an image, and it will bring up any iterations of that image that are being used across the web, and, you know, try and offer similar matches as well. A lot of photographers are using this to make sure that people aren't using their image without paying for it. So you can get caught out there. So maybe what you think is, well, I'll tell you what, I'll do it myself. And that's absolutely valid as well. Nowadays with iPhones and, you know, Samsungs and all this kind of stuff, you can do some fantastic imagery. And all it takes is thinking about the composition of the shot, you know, how you're going to light it, what kind of story you're going to tell. And you can get some pretty good stuff. The image on the left there of the food on the table is taken by Andy's wife. And she's really good at creating this kind of stuff. She has a local business where she cooks dinners and freezes them and sells them to local people as much healthier alternatives to ready meals. It's called I'll Do Tea. Really clever. Now, the thing with it is she's got a good eye for composition, as you can see. She's got a good eye for lighting as well. She's made it a nice warm shot. She's made it feel like a nice meal that you're going to have of an evening. But some people aren't particularly good at that, you know, so maybe you want to consider a professional. And on the right hand side of the screen, you'll see something there, which is a professional shot, a photographer that we work with. And what they're really good at doing is capturing a particular moment, or positioning something, or bringing an image to life with a story. They're good at all these kinds of things. And in this particular case, the brief was, we want to make this ice cream look really high end. It was designed to go to chefs so that they could use it to create even more indulgent desserts. And this company did all kinds of mad flavors of ice cream. They even did foie gras ice cream, champagne, goat's cheese flavor. And the idea was that chefs could use it to create unusual desserts. So we were going for that artist palette. We were going for that kind of high-end look. And as you can see by the words on there, it's trying to position it similar to wine or whiskey or coffee connoisseurs. What you find with professional photographers is that this is what they do every day. So they've got a really good eye for framing, composition, lighting, all that kind of stuff, but also storytelling that a lot of amateurs might not be able to do. One word of caution, I've worked with tons of photographers over the years, varying in price. You can get them from around £400 a day to £2,000 a day, depending on, you know, how popular they are, all that kind of stuff. And I've done a lot of art direction with them across food photography, portraits, video, film, all that kind of stuff. And what I tend to find is quite a lot of them will see themselves as an artist, and that's fine. But then they want to own their own work, even though you're paying for them. So what I always stipulate when I'm talking to a photographer is, I want all of the shots from the day, and I own all of the images. I'm paying you for your services, so I own all of the images that you produce without license. They're mine to use, all my clients to use, should I say. If that's the particular case, then you might find yourself coming out with 200 to 400 shots, and get them all. Don't just say, I'll take the edits from you. Make sure you get them all, because sometimes you can crop in to images that haven't worked and you can pull out other bits. Now, I would expect to get a bank of maybe 20 to 30 photos that I can use. So, you know, around 5 to 10% of the actual entire day. But when you crop into them or you adjust them yourself, you can actually expand that to maybe 75, 100 images. So you really get your bang for your buck then, because that's coming out as much better. And yeah, again, Bruce has said, get them in raw format if it's all possible. It's the best place to edit from. Totally agree. Make sure the raw, not compressed already, as well. So I would definitely advocate for working with photographers, because they're professionals. They're going to generally get you a more consistent, a more engaging result in the photography. But if you're pretty good yourself, you've got a dab hand and you've not got the budget, it is entirely achievable as well. Now let's talk about personality. Sorry, just before I do that, I will say that there are illustrators within stock libraries. There's lots of graphics and illustration that you can use. So it doesn't have to be imagery. If you've got a subject that's maybe a little bit dry, maybe you want to use imagery, such as graphics and illustration, to bring that to life. And again, you can find lots of that online in stock libraries, or you can employ a local or a national illustrator, and again just type in illustrator and look at their portfolio, look at their styles as well. Now I could chat forever about imagery. I love it, so I could bore you to death, but we better move on to communication, because now you've got your personality and you've got your presentation together. Let's think about how your brand's going to talk to people, and we'll start with strap lines. There's 3 different types of strap lines that I'm going to show you today. The first one is positioners. This is where brands establish themselves as a market leader usually. So the king of beers, the happiest place on earth, the best 4x4 by far, the world's favorite airline. It's a big, bold, unsubstantiated claim. But what it does is it really puts you out there. There was a brilliant one from Hertz, and you know, they're the car hire people. And they said, we're the second best car hire firm in the world, which means that we're still trying. Really clever way to go about tweaking the positioner on its head and saying, we're always pushing to be better. We've not arrived, we're pushing harder. But then you get the descriptor. eBay, buy it, sell it, love it. This is talking about what you do or what you're about. Never knowingly undersold. You know, we're the best for price. They're not saying that. They're saying we're never knowingly undersold. And part of their John Lewis guarantee is if you can find it somewhere cheaper and prove it, you'll match that price, and sometimes even knock 10% off. Ron Seal, probably the most quoted strap line of all of the strap lines. It does what it says on the tin. And we've even embellished this ourselves now to things like it does exactly what it says on the tin. And then you've got KFC, finger licking good. Very descriptive. It brings that to life, doesn't it? The idea of licking your fingers afterwards. Well, then we've got conceptual, and this tends to blend a few different things, a bit of descriptor, a little bit of the positioner in there, and maybe something a bit different to make it a bit more interesting. So Apple, think different. This was a massive campaign for them, and then the strapline stuck and they kind of stick with it, they keep it. L'Oreal, because you're worth it. You know, what does that say to the customers? It says you're worth it. It's empowering people. And it's aligning with those people, and it's saying you are worth it. Give it a go. It's really interesting the way that people use these things. Coca-Cola going with the emotive, you can't beat the feeling. Bit of positioner in there, you can't beat it. And then also the emotive side, that feeling and just, you know, putting that moment out to people. Really clever. And of course, Tesco, every little helps. The point is with strap lines is you can choose what's appropriate for you, and don't get too hung up on it having to be amazing and really clever. Use it to enhance your brand. Don't try and cover everything. What we often see with clients is they want us to try and get every component and every aspect of their business into it. You don't need to. The point of this is to capture people's attention. It's to support the logo and the typeface and the colors. It's there to enhance your brand. And you can use lots of different ones. You know, you can change from one to the other. As long as it's something that's going to add that personality, it's something that you should consider using.
Right. Thanks, Ben. We're going to touch now on features and benefits. and really what how they should be differentiated. Because lots of people do get these wrongs and they confuse the features and benefits. Really, they try to put everything on one page, and it can be off-putting to either a potential client or existing clients. So just work out, what actually is a feature and what actually is a benefit. So feature, what does it do? So as an example, I a couple of months ago was in the market for a new golf club, a driver, because I broke my last one. So what were the features of this driver that I'd been looking at for quite a while? Well, it had a flexible shaft, it had a bigger head, I could adjust the head, and it had a soft grip. They were the features. When it comes to the benefits, think about what problem does it solve. So the flexible shaft, it gives me more speed. Bigger head, I should be able to hit it further. Adjustable head, I should be able to change the pitch for different weather conditions. And it's got a soft grip, so it gives me more comfort. So how does it enhance the user experience? Well, for me, hopefully, with all those things I've just mentioned, I'm going to play better and I'm going to lower my score. So it's really easy to get these features and benefits mixed up. If you miss out the key messages, again, you're missing out potential on clients, customers, that type of thing. So again, just take a step back. Now, also, we've got on the screen call to action. Essentially, people need to be told what to do next. Sounds really simple, but if you don't, then they probably won't do it. You've got to make it easy to progress. Again, just don't leave it to them. Don't assume, they'll click buy now, they'll click email me, they'll click go to the website. You've got to help them along the journey. And those that do that, actually, you'll get more, believe me. There's a couple of years ago, there was someone put a picture of a cat in a hat, just on the internet, and it didn't say anything, and it got loads. I can't remember the company. It was a big company. It got loads, hundreds and thousands of likes and shares and that type of thing. It was a bit of an experiment. They did it a couple of weeks later. Same picture of a cat in a hat, and but they put please like and share, and the engagement they got, outperformed it by like 10 to 1 or something like that. It was unbelievable. It's strange, isn't it? If you're told to like and share something, naturally you'll do it. Do that with your business. Like I said, go to the website, email me, click here, buy now, that type of thing. Just don't leave it up to people to make up their own mind. You make up their mind for them.
So then when you're putting these key messages out there, it's also important to think about your tone of voice. So you might be very formal and you might need to come across in a formal sense, particularly if you're doing legal or financial services. You want to carry a certain amount of authority, or you might want to be, trustable, reliable, dependable. So you need to be straight talking. But then you might want to be a little bit more down to earth. O2 used Sean Bean for years on their marketing campaigns because he's got that kind of tone of voice that's down to earth. It's kind of gritty, and that can appeal to people. And what we often do with clients is we think about who was it that might do the voiceover if this was an advert on telly or if it was on radio or whatever. What kind of tone of voice do they have? Do they have a nice, easy listening voice? Is it something that's a pleasure to listen to? Is it something that's a bit more shrill? Are you trying to get that excitement across? Someone like Keith Lemon, he's very silly. He does a deliberate broad Yorkshire accent, and he messes up his words, that kind of stuff. Is that the kind of thing that's going to represent maybe a comedy brand or, something that's very light-hearted? I think he's done some adverts on TV where he's come across in that particular way and maybe appeals to a younger audience, that kind of stuff. It's very subjective. Or Mariella Frostrup was a great one. She did loads of voiceovers. She's like Nigella. She's got that sensual kind of seductive voice, very sort of velvety and very soft. And so there's different ways you can think about it. And the diction and the intonation that they use and the language that they use is very key to that. So if you're thinking about your brand, if you beauty, that kind of thing, you might want to be very descriptive. You might want to use a lot of very descriptive, colourful sort of language that's embellishing things. You see restaurants do it all the time on the menus. You know, they don't just say this is bangers and mash. It's, you know, like the Marks and Spencer advert. They you know, this isn't just bangers and mash. This is a soft crushed new potato that's been whipped with butter and all this kind of stuff. And they really bring it to life and make it sound very appealing and very, you know, seductive in that sense. So perhaps you can use the language in your key messages to convey that aspect of your personality. I'm going to give you some ideas now as to how some of the big brands have done it. These are people that can afford to sit down with a massive team of writers, but they actually have a team that have to communicate with their customers. And it's a great example of how they think about it, how they structure it. So you can see, even not just in the way they've written this, but in the way that they've presented it, they're getting that personality across by using bigger type and smaller type, by highlighting words in red. They're really bringing this together. There's nothing in the world that brings people all over the world together like the beautiful game. And no one brings that passion, spirit, and excitement to gaming more beautifully than FIFA. They care, so keep it passionate. Inspire. Every player can be Ronaldo on the pitch, so make them feel like it in the copy. Put them right on the centre spot. Look at the way they've designed of the greatest stadiums of the greatest clubs in the world. It's magical. Come on, get stuck in. They're really helping you. You can hear it, you know, by the way that they're presenting this stuff. Your headline is your best mate holding a footy shouting, "You coming or what?" Your body copy is the rousing chant of 50,000 fans rising from a stadium. I can imagine it. It's painting pictures in my imagination straight away. And your call to action is the piercing kick-off whistle that raises the roof and lights the spark under a tinderbox of colour and passion. And the greatest thing in the world, football. You can hear the TV ad almost from this. And they want their writers to convey it. And then for Medal of Honor, this is one of them shoot 'em up type games, you know, military style. Your target for Medal of Honor emails is not a player. They're an elite tier 1 soldier. They're fully immersed in these games. And so in order to communicate with these people, they want their writers to think of them in that sense. They want to make the email make them want to play the game again. You know, it's got to bring them right back to that moment. They're immersed in an intense battle experience that's authentic in every way. The ruthless brutality of modern warfare in a hostile Afghan landscape has become their home. The fighting is extreme, the environment complex, but as far as you're concerned, things are dead simple. It's literally life or death. Your copy is like the clipped voice of their commanding officer, their comrade and leader. You may use military jargon, soldier. They're even talking to the writers in this language now to really illustrate it. But do not get distracted from your objective. Real, credible military communications. Is that clear? Your headlines should be urgent, like emergency dispatches. Your call to action should be emotive, but orders nonetheless. Can you see what I mean by how you can bring writing to life? And this is something you can use in your website, on your social posts, in your advertising, in your brochures. Think about how you write. We've already had no, we've not had that, sorry. Yeah, so you get the idea. The point is, it's about getting that brand personality out in everything that you do. And everything you do is an opportunity. Andy.
So branding is a gut feeling. Essentially, it's not what you say, it's what they think. People are going to make snap judgments all the time, whether they like something, dislike, or they're sitting on the fence and they're unsure. It's like the first 30 seconds of an interview, or the first 3 minutes. You kind of know whether someone's right for the job, or I don't really like this guy, but he is right for the job. And, you know, you've got all these thoughts going through your head. But it's like meeting a suitable partner. You know, do you have common ground with them? Do you share the same interests? Do they align together? But people make decisions in all different ways in which you presented your brand. So think like a potential client and actually look at it from the outside in. Whenever we go into a business, that's one of the key messages, is to say you can be so immersed in your own brand, in your own business. You want to get all these different things out there. And as I said earlier, it can be off-putting. But just think of it from a client. What does a client want to hear? And if you look at it from the outside in, you'll often see other things, what you can implement or change around, or things that you've already done that aren't working so well. It's a nice little exercise. Also, when we come to brand health, what we're looking at is the reputation. What is the reputation of the business? What are people saying about you? You know, are there any reviews out there on Google, on your website, on your social channels? How many followers have you got? Do you have any particular brand ambassadors who are shouting from the rooftops about all the great products or services and getting the word out there? What's the media saying about you? Are you in any of the trade media, consumer, local media, that type of thing? Or the overall perception of your brand. We've also got share of voice. So how much are you being seen out there? As I said earlier, what media are you in? Are you in the right thing that's relevant to your industry? You know, are you getting the right coverage? Are people starting to get in touch via email or ringing the phone or contacting you via your website? Do you do any advertising? We're not talking big bucks here. Could be a little Facebook ad, could be some basic Google ads, that type of thing. And are they appropriate to your industry? Are the areas where your customers are actually looking is probably the most important thing. And it's really the reputation and share of voice is how your brand presents itself within all of the areas I've just been talking about. Got a good example here. Anyone remember Joey from Friends when he had a Porsche for a couple of days? It was a pretty good episode. But you know, he loved Porsches, and someone had parked a Porsche there. He went out and he got all the gear for it, the hat, the bum bag, the coat, the gloves. And he wanted to convince people he was the owner of the Porsche. Basically, he was using it to chat up women. And when you think about it, you know, your team are the first ambassadors of your brand. You've got to live the brand. That's a bit of an extreme case. So I don't want you going dressing up and everything like that, but really live the brand. And that can be anything from the way you or your colleagues answer the phone. There was an agency in Manchester a number of years ago called True North. And the way they answered the phone, it wasn't just a normal good morning, True North. They'd answer the phone, "This is True North." And they were trying to establish a sense of grandeur and excitement of people calling up. So your brand can be everywhere. It's how you talk to people, how you present yourself, at networking events or on the phone or email or through websites. It's how you communicate to them. Don't just leave it to yourself. And another thing about brands is a lot of people get confused and go, well, I'm not a brand. A brand is McDonald's and Burger King and that type of thing. You are a brand. So think about what your customers want to hear and convey it to them.
And that does bring us nicely to people can be brands. If you think about Richard Branson, he's synonymous with Virgin. He's absolutely synonymous with it. Mike Ashley, owner of Sports Directors. In terms of Richard Branson, he's the spirit of adventure. He's the spirit of punk in terms of a corporate brand. He's a market disruptor. He didn't like the fact that British Airways was dominating the airline travel in the 80s. So he launched Virgin Atlantic. He did, even Coca-Cola, he tried to take that on. Some win, some fail, but nonetheless, he's seen as this adventurous spirit, somebody who's fearless, will have a go at anything. He flies around the world in a balloon. He's trying to take people into space. He is a brand in that respect. And Virgin represents that. And you get Virgin fanatics who buy everything Virgin because they think of it as a brand of quality. They think of it as an adventurous spirit. Well, they just like what they're about. So they want to support it. Similarly, you can do damage, with your brand or personality if you're very much a representative about it. So Mike Ashley is a great example of this. He sent a text to let a whole raft of his workforce go. He's known for 0-hour contracts. He's got the image of a ruthless fat cat, a greedy man, treats his staff poorly, that kind of stuff. So the brand damage that he does, I mean, it doesn't seem to be affecting him at the moment. He's buying all sorts, but the fact is he can be damaging to the brand. And I know that they're trying to push him into the background because they don't want him to be the figurehead that everyone associates with a lot of these brands. Now, you might be thinking, is this too much for my business? You know, do I really need to do all this stuff? I'm too busy making what I do, or, you know, running my business to think about all of this stuff. That's fine. You don't have to do it. You don't have to even consider any of this stuff, but obviously you're here for a reason. So what we'd say is do as much or as little as you feel. You know, there's some of the things that we've talked about today. How can you implement them into your business? Could you give yourself a strap line? Is it something that you could just maybe have a think about? Can you think about when you write that social media post, who is it that's going to be reading this? What language should I use? What kind of stuff matters to them, and how can I demonstrate that I get them? Something we talk about a lot across all our different webinars. And what I'd say is build the brand how you want it. You know, make it a representation and an extension of who you are. Why did you start this business? Are you passionate about what you do? Don't just ignore the power of branding, because if you do these things right, you could grow your business exponentially. And don't expect it overnight, but you can sometimes stumble across things that really hit a note and resonate with people, like Weetabix did with the beans on the Bix. You know, it's just little things like that can catapult you from where you are today to having so many inquiries you don't know what to do with it. Don't just make bold statements though, live it. You've got to be it. I'm going to tell you a story to finish up about 3 butchers on a street in Glasgow. Now, the first butcher buys himself an A-frame and thinks, right, I need more customers. I'm going to put a sign out there. So what shall I write on the sign? Well, I'll put the best butcher in the country. Now, I'm not sure how he justifies this. Has he done research of all the butchers in Scotland? You know, this bit of an unfounded statement. And the next butcher sees it and thinks, right, that's good. I need an A-frame. I need one of those boards out front. What can I put on it? Well, I need to go one up on him, because as he's saying the best in the country, I'll say I'm the best butcher in the world. It's ridiculous. You know, he's not thought it through. People might not vocalize this, but they're probably thinking in their head, how can he say he's the best butcher in the world? You know, it's just a farcical statement. So the third butcher comes along and puts his A-frame out and says, let's do something a bit more realistic. I'm the best butcher on this street. And guess what? He's the one who got all the customers. So the point is, be realistic, show a bit of humility, you know, do something that is achievable and is believable if you're going to do this kind of stuff, because that's really going to help you to connect with your audience out there. So thanks very much for listening. We've got some time if you want, if you've got any questions, something specific that you're thinking about in terms of your own branding, either pop it in the chat, or if you can turn your microphone on, we'll be happy to help you if we can. We're almost there. We're just going to tell you a little bit about some of the workshops that we're doing. And also, I'm just going to skip past that because I think it's out of date. And also, if you could give us a review, thanks. I think it was Simon that gave us a nice review on Google. Was it Simon?
It was Bruce.
Oh, Bruce. It was Bruce. Sorry. Yes. Thank you very much, Bruce. Really appreciate that.
No problem.
It's something that I think, you know, you guys should all be doing this yourselves. If you've not set up Google My Business, get it set up. We saw earlier, lots of people use the reviews now as a part of their product research journey that they do to buying a product. And make sure that you do ask for reviews from your customers, new and old, because the more you can get, the better. And it's essential to helping small businesses like all of us here. We're a small business, and we really rely on it because it helps other people find out whether we're any good or not. So please do give us a review. All the details are on there. It
takes less than a minute, by the way.
Yeah, less than a minute.
You're stuck for time.
Yeah, and make sure you're asking your customers. And if you want a copy of this, you can get it from our website in the download section at royalflushmarketing.co.uk.